Hi, I'm Andrea Karen, Business Development Director for the US at Bridge for Billions. Welcome to Bridge Talks. As you know, Bridge for Billions is a social organization that exists to enable more early-stage entrepreneurs of all kinds to thrive, generating jobs and solutions for everyone so our economies sustainably meet the needs of all. We do this by co-creating effective incubation programs around the world for entrepreneurs of all kinds with our mission-aligned partners. These Bridge Talks are short conversations with various ecosystem actors supporting inclusive entrepreneurship in many ways. These talks are meant to connect listeners to information on what's happening in the ecosystem and foster collaboration. I hope you enjoy.
Okay. Hi, Andrew. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's a great start to the year, so I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Good to hear that. Thank you so much for joining Bridge Talks today.
No problem.
So I'll do a quick intro to you, but as we know, these are very short little episodes, so I'll intro you and then we'll kind of just get right into it.
Beautiful.
Perfect. So for those who don't know Andrew, Andrew is a New Orleans native and 2014 philosophy graduate from Loyola University in New Orleans. Additionally, has an MSc in philosophy and public policy from the London School of Economics. And after graduate school, Andrew actually joined Venture for America as a 2016 fellow and spent his time working as an executive analyst at Lucid in New Orleans. There, he worked for the CEO, Patrick Corner, and engaged in a host of projects ranging from product marketing to financial forecasting to office design, which I like. That's very diverse. Currently, Andrew is the VP of Venture Growth at Venture for America, where he is responsible for ensuring VFA's entrepreneur services support, VFA's mission to develop an on-ramp to entrepreneurship and successfully take founders from 0 to 1. And finally, I don't want to forget that Andrew is the founder of two spirits brands, River Basin Distillery and Exclave Spirits. So did I miss anything there? Is there anything you want to add, Andrew, before we go on?
No, that's perfect. The TLDR is I wear many, many hats. So that's it.
Perfect. Love that. So I'm sure you'll have a lot of commentary coming from different angles today. That's
Definitely.
so awesome. So like Venture for America, we at Bridge for Billions also have a similar mission to increase the access to economic opportunity in the US, as you know. And I'm excited to get into this conversation today because not only do we have that in common, but you've been a VFA fellow, you're a founder yourself, and now you're, of course, the VP of Venture Growth at VFA. So I'm ready to dig in. Does that sound good?
Let's do it. Let's
Cool.
do it.
Perfect. So do you want to start out by just telling us about Venture for America, the mission, vision, and of course, the fellowship program?
Yeah, for sure. So Venture for America is a 2-year fellowship for recent college grads that see themselves like in entrepreneurship, right? So it's very, clear and straightforward in terms of how to become a doctor, how to become a lawyer. There's med school, there's law school. The path to being a founder is much more opaque, and VFA exists to sort of make it clear, how you can enter that world. And functionally, how it happens is recent college grads apply to become Venture for America fellows. From there, they receive access to our private job board that sources startup or high growth jobs in 13 different cities across the country, and a whole host of different roles. So it could be marketing, it could be finance, it could be operations, product, you name it, there's likely a job that's on the board there. And the real thought process is, there's no substitute for experience, right? Like we can pontificate about how to start a company, right? Like we can read all the case studies, we can listen to all the podcasts, but there is no better, teacher than actually working with the founder or working with the CEO and understanding, what it takes to build that company. And
Totally.
hopefully, the fellows, they see themselves say, oh, actually, I think that I can be a founder, right? So reducing that imposter syndrome and sort of the reducing the barriers to access. Or it's, you know what, this is awesome. I think I'm much more equipped to be a startup leader and I can, very clearly contribute to the growth of whether it be a company, an industry, an ecosystem, all of the above. So it's really just empowering our fellows with the necessary tools and frameworks to figure out how they see themselves supporting a very diverse and nuanced entrepreneurship ecosystem. In terms of like the work that my department does, the venture growth team, it's pretty simple and straightforward. So we're trying to answer the question of, if we were to be the friends and family round for those that don't have access to one, what does that look like? It's pretty clear and straightforward. It's the allocation of capital. But we take a broad definition of capital, include, of course, dollars and cents, but also intellectual and social capital. And
Mm.
how that manifests is three very clear pillars: capital, connections, and coaching. So how do we help our founders get money? How do we connect them to all of the stakeholders that make sense for their business, customers, advisors, investors, et cetera, and also coaching? So how do we make sure that they have frameworks to grow as founders and, ultimately make that journey from being the founder to being the executive of that startup?
Amazing. That's great to hear. I resonate personally. I actually studied entrepreneurship in undergrad because I was trying to figure out what way and what venue there was to discover if I wanted to be a founder or not myself. And now working at Bridge with very close with our founder, it's exactly what you're saying. It's that learn by doing approach is just yeah, it's a different ball game compared to, listening to the podcast or studying what entrepreneurship is in a manual. So I love what VFA is doing. And I wanted to ask, since you were a fellow and since your time at VFA, what have you seen evolve? Maybe, the type of applicants, the number of applicants, the interests in entrepreneurship post university within this age group, or maybe it's something else. I'd love to hear, how you've seen VFA evolve, within this complicated ecosystem that you're referring to.
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question. VFA is interesting because it's an organization that's over 10 years old.
Mm.
And sort of once you cross that threshold, right, like you have a lot of insight and you have a lot of touch points in terms of, what has happened since then.
Mm.
And I think, I'm a philosophy student, right? So I'm sort of always reflective in trying to connect the dots. And I think, what has really been hitting me lately, and this could also be a product of, I'm also 10 years removed from college myself. So I'm just perpetually thinking about, okay, what just happened, right?
Mm.
When VFA started, the founding sort of seed was, smart people build things, right? People want to become founders. And I think at the time, it's sort of, my first introduction to VFA as a fellow, it felt like a very fringe concept, right? So this is, like, oh, wait, like there are other, people that just want to build things that don't want to go to school. Like, I thought that I was the only one that thought that this was probably not my path, right?
Mm.
And I think that sort of that concept really catapulted VFA for a lot of people, individuals that thought that they were by themselves and realized that there was an entire world of like-minded entrepreneurial people,
Mm.
right? And it's interesting because that paired very well with, what I jokingly call the golden age of startups, right? So think like the 2012 to 2018 era, right? Like incredible growth across the board, right? Like the number of new investment funds is like
Yeah.
crazy number, right? The number of exits is insane. Like it was the best time to sort of be in startups, right? So it's VFA was well timed there. And I think recently what's been very fascinating is like that concept of, smart people want to build things is no longer like on the fringes of what we think about. Like it's very much a part of, a culture of building and a culture of innovation that all employers expect from, who works there, right? It could be the largest publicly traded company down to a three-person startup, right? The
Mm.
concept of ownership, of innovation, problem solving, building, like these very entrepreneurial, like
Yeah.
tinged phrases, they're what everybody is looking for, right? And I think what we're realizing and honestly trying to codify is, okay, if career 1.0 is, you find an organization, you rise through the ranks, you do your job, max out the IRA, 401k, retire.
Mm.
What is career 2.0? And I think the concept of an entrepreneurial mindset and being able to deploy that in many different, facets, that is what we're doing right now, both as an economy, but also in particular at VFA is helping fellows understand how you can take a very nebulous concept like entrepreneurial mindset and apply it to everything that you do, whether you're
Mm.
working for an ESO or a startup, whether you're at, an innovation hub at a large organization. The concept of identifying, triaging problems, and creating actionable next steps, that is what the foundation of work will be like for the next 20, 25 years. And we're sort of, okay, if this is what's important, how do we put the words to it,
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And in your opinion, how do you think the current entrepreneurial ecosystem is prepared for this career 2.0, for, the growing number of new founders, new young founders? Because we also see that in the GEM, the Global Entrepreneurial, report that comes out, is that number of young entrepreneurs keeps rising. So you're spot on. What I would love to hear, how do you think our ecosystem is ready today? And maybe kind of what's the biggest need that you see
Yeah.
that still exists?
Yeah, for sure. I think we're speaking the right language, right? Like everyone has an innovation hub. The concept of entrepreneurship is, old hat at this point,
Yeah.
right? We understand how to use the language. And I think what we're realizing right now is the concept of founder or being an entrepreneur, it isn't a single monolithic bucket, right? Like there are many different ways that you can be an entrepreneur and you can sort of work within entrepreneurship, right? I
Yeah.
referenced the golden age of startups, right? And that's sort of defined by the high growth tech company that's going to raise VC and ultimately, race to some massive exit, right? That is for sure a profile, but it's one of many profiles. And I think our position at VFA and sort of all of the cities that we work at, we've realized just the nuanced sort of reality of being an entrepreneur, right? So there are founders that are like, look, I'm starting something to supplement my lifestyle. I'm a lifestyle founder, right? Like I don't really have any intent to raise institutional capital. Rather, I have a product, I'm generating revenue. It could be high growth, but I'm really trying to supplement this way of living that is important to me, right? So less of, you know, living to work and more of like working to live, you know, like that is something that's important. Or small businesses, fundamentally important, depending on where you're from. I think it's easy to sort of like, oh yeah, small businesses, they're small, like they're absolutely critical and vital. And the risks that you take on as a high growth founder may not necessarily be the risks of somebody else that is running a small business. And those things are important.
Mm.
And also too, right, the concept of consultancy or services at a higher level. We have all these smart people, these smart builders that have had phenomenal careers, right? Like they can help other founders in many different ways, whether it's, CEO coaching, whether it's,
Mm.
marketing services, whether it's, fractional CFO, you name it. Everyone has incredible career experience that they're trying to figure out how to use that experience to sort of take more ownership and drive their career.
Mm.
That's exciting and can be challenging in a lot of respects because what happens when you have, an entire economy full of people that look at themselves as builders and innovators? Where do they fit? And I think sort of figuring out how to support and in service all these people is a great area of opportunity and area of growth and a conversation that like we're going to have to face at some point. Like we can face it in 10 years when it's, sort of really causing things to explode, or we can sort of be proactive and anticipate, what needs to be built, what services do these folks need, and sort of how do we leverage that gumption and innovation to just help existing companies grow. Like it's much more in partnership than it is in competition.
Totally. Totally. I love that. Yeah, that need for a real ecosystem, people working together, coming together. Uh, I hate to say this again. I mentioned it on the last bridge talk. So if someone's listening to all of these, in order, but it's something we really do say at Bridge for Billions a lot, that we live in. I personally think there's a bit of an ego system that still exists where people do find a bit of competition. Whereas if we could just, yeah, figure out how to better work together, and there are actually a lot of things happening to bring people, together within the ecosystem. So I'm so happy to see that. But I do agree we need to keep pushing as actors in the ecosystem to work better together. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. Okay. So, well, we're running out of time, but I did want to ask you one quick question, one
Yep.
last quick question. Um, Back to VFA, I would love to hear from you if you just want to share with us kind of your proudest moment or some really cool, impact that you saw, a cool story, just to share and leave, that taste in everyone's mouth as we close this talk.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm gonna cheat and probably say two things.
Okay.
One, I think just as an organization, sort of being open and responsive to change with like the economy, I think has been something that's incredibly sort of exciting and what I'm proud of, both being as an employee, but also as an alumni, right? Like I joke a lot that like I can leave VFA tomorrow, but I'll always be an alumni and always be a part of this
Mm,
community. It's easy to sort of say, this is how we do things, this is the way we've always done things, period.
yeah.
And we have to consistently reinvent ourselves and be nimble and responsive to the needs that are being presented to us. So I think that's, incredibly something I'm incredibly proud of. Um, I think the second thing too is related to our accelerator cohort last year. So we host a zero equity accelerator every year. Last year we had a cohort of six, and we completely redefined like what that offering looked like, right?
Mm,
So, I mean, you know how most accelerators work. It's very, very program heavy. There's a lot of sort of either guided learning or async learning. And as
mm,
I said at the top, there is no substitute for experience. And so I challenged the cohort to say, you know what? We're not going to have 10 seminars a week, and we're not going to have these learning modules and these learning blocks. We're going to focus on problems, right? We're going to identify four very clear buckets that you have to navigate and figure out as a founder. It's product, growth, operations, strategic, legal, and finance. So what are you building? How are you building it, right? How are you selling it? Who are you selling it to? How are you preparing to do both of those things efficiently? And how can you not be scared of legal and finance and use them as, strategic levers? And it was a bit like nerve-wracking because we completely threw the playbook out, but the way that our fellows sort of gravitated towards it and sort of leaned in on like the real problem solving for the business
mm.
instead of like the esoteric, this is how I can build a business. It proved to be absolutely phenomenal, to the point where like, my department is taking that framework and opening up to our entire fellow community. So we
Mm.
sort of beta tested it with the accelerator, this framework, and now I think we're in a very unique position to offer a lot of tools to help the founders solve the problems. You know what I mean? I think it's easy and it is fun, right? To talk about the essence of being a founder. But it's like, okay, I have a thing. How do I sell the thing better?
Yeah.
How do I make sure that I'm building the processes and the systems to scale and grow, right? These are the very important critical things that like there's no substitute for experience. So I'm excited to see how, both my team and the organization at large is just able to help founders solve problems much more quickly and efficient.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, at the end of the day, and it's what you were saying, is very much intrinsic in VFA regardless, is that learn by doing, right? So
Exactly.
it's cool to see that you're applying this value, this core, part of VFA and who you are to other aspects. And we totally get that and agree at Bridge. So very cool to hear. Okay, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to wrap up. I feel like we could, or at least I could continue asking you questions forever, but thank you so much for your time today. Um, and yeah, it's been great having you on this Bridge
Of
Talk.
course, it was a pleasure. I love these conversations.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew.
Thanks for listening to this Bridge Talk. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have questions about this talk or want to get in touch, please email me at andy@bridgeforbillions.org. I love talking about this topic and exploring how more of us can collaborate to further support inclusive entrepreneurship in the US and around the world.